Alright guys, welcome to your video lecture on the water cycle and an introduction to fresh water. I guess I should have shown you this first. So here's our assignment page today. So complete the notes using this video lecture that you're watching. I'm going to link it right here. That's where you should find it. Again, remember, starting next week, I'm going to start putting the videos inside the actual assignments so they're easier and more streamlined to find. You're going to complete the notes right here. For those of you who are online, you're welcome to make your own copy of these notes and fill in the blanks. You're going to have to add text boxes. And then if you are a face-to-face student who I've already seen this week, you've got a copy in your notebook. Please fill it out there. Take your pictures when you're done. It's 5 points to complete this part. After that, there's a water cycle diagram also in your notebooks if you are face-to-face. If you're not face-to-face, if you're online, you can either draw your own water cycle on a blank piece of paper, or you can print off this copy of the water cycle diagram. You're going to complete that while you're watching this water cycle video. And then the last thing I'd like you to do is, after you've completed the diagram, I want you to define the following words for me. I can't stop you from Googling the definitions, but please be sure you understand the meaning of the word. If you look up the definition and you just copy and paste, if you don't understand it, it's not going to be very helpful to you. So we've got evaporation, infiltration, runoff, condensation, precipitation, transpiration, and sublimation. So you're going to define each of those. You can do that on a Google Doc. If you've created a water cycle diagram on your Google Doc, you can write them down on a piece of paper. You can, you won't be able to put them in a text box because you're going to submit files instead. Remember, you can add, and you're going to have to add more than one file into your submission box here. All right, let's get started, shall we? So we've spent the past couple days looking at a microscopic view of water, so our molecular level, which is quite interesting. Most people don't think about water being that small, but it is. And we've discovered all the different properties that water has. It has a lot, and they're very unique to the molecule. So it's pretty important that you learn those properties and understand. You should have done the study guide yesterday with me, or either by yourself, of those different properties, kind of summarizing everything that you've learned either in that stations or the lab activity. But we're going to skip the bell ringer part today. And we are also going to, this is what we did the other day. You'd either do the properties of water lab or the activity stations. That kind of helped you discover on a molecular level what water was. All right, here's where we start though. And again, we're going to skip this right here. We're going to look at the total water distribution on Earth. So whether you understand or know it or not, about 97% of the total water on the Earth is salt water. And while salt water is good and it provides an awesome ecosystem for many of our aquatic animals to live and our aquatic plants to live, and organisms as well, our small ones like bacteria and phytoplankton and all that good stuff, it isn't very good for it's not very beneficial for living things like us, because as you know, we can't drink salt water. If we were stranded on an island, it's not a good idea to drink the ocean water. It would make you sick and you would dehydrate faster. So if we look at the percentages of Earth's water, only about 3% is fresh water. Even more than that, if we break that 3% down into the total distribution of all our freshwater things, most of it, almost 70% there, is trapped in ice caps or glaciers, meaning that we can't use that water either. Another 30.1% is found in the groundwater. The groundwater, a misconception here is that our groundwater is in like underground lakes and rivers, and while those happen, mostly our groundwater is just water molecules in the spaces between our soil particles or our sand particles. And then less than 1%, where at 0.3% of all fresh water on Earth is actually that surface water, which is again what we have access to. And then there's about 0.9% in other things like living beings like us. We have water in us, so that would consider as well. And again, having water in a human is not very helpful if we want to like irrigate our crops or even drink the water. That's not going to work out. So if we look at that surface water, if we break that down even more into its different percentages, most of the surface water that we see are actually in lakes, about 87% of it. The other percentages are swamps at 11% and rivers at 2%. The biggest takeaway here from this slide is that I want you to understand that we have a really limited amount of fresh water, which as we go further in our lessons on the hydrosphere becomes more and more important as we learn, especially in Earth and Environmental, as we learn how we are polluting those different water systems like our rivers and lakes. And we are going to skip this one as well. I'll probably link this on our Canvas page. This is going to just show us visually how much fresh water there is. I have a poem for you. So, water and life. Water is important, something most people know. Some choose to ignore it and let water flow. They leave on the faucet, take long showers, leaving the tap dripping, give a drink to their flowers. More valuable than gold, the key to all life, water should be saved and not be the cause of strife. Save your water, don't let it run. It's our kulena to save the water for everyone. So this is a piece written by a high schooler about water. Water is important. We need it to live. That's why we're able to live on Earth. As we know, we are, or as you should know, or will learn eventually, that we are wasting our water, especially as Americans. We need to be more conscious of how much water we use. But we'll talk about that another day as well. This lecture is just a brief overview. We're going to go into most of these things a little bit more in depth. But this is what we call a watershed. It's also called a river basin. If you've been in the classroom with me, we have a beautiful map of the North Carolina river basins. There's about 17 of them. And a river basin or a watershed is basically the area, as you can see, defined right here, around a river in which the water is going to flow. So if rain falls right here, eventually, if it's not absorbed by the ground and goes into our groundwater, it's going to make its way to the river and run off. And then we've got the different parts of the river as well, which is what you need to write down. So the river source, or the headwaters, which is typically found in mountains. Tributaries are small streams or even smaller rivers that flow into that main river right here. A floodplain is any area that's going to flood when the river floods, and even if it doesn't flood all that often, if it has a chance of flooding because of the river water level going too high, then it's called a floodplain. Those are typically really fertile areas because we have a lot of water there. We get a lot of soil deposits there, so it's good for growing. We'll often find fields there. Meanders are the bends in our rivers. And then, of course, we have our wetlands, which are our boggy swamp areas. They actually act as nature's filters, but again, that's a discussion for another day. And we've got our river mouth. So it's just a basic diagram of a river, which we'll look into a couple lectures in the future. Again, what is a watershed? A watershed is a land area from which water drains into a river system. Again, it's just the drain. So like I said, if the water falls right here and it doesn't go into the ground, doesn't infiltrate, it's going to go into our river. We have, as far as freshwater, we have ponds, which are small bodies of still water formed naturally by hollowing or embarking. You can find ponds most places. We have one outside of Emeru. We've got our lakes, which are a little bit larger than ponds. They're a large body of water surrounded by land. Sometimes they're uninhabited by humans, not messed with by humans like this, or sometimes they are developed upon where houses are built. But I think they're more beautiful when they are untouched by man in such a way. We've got our wetlands, which is an area that is covered by a shallow layer of water during some or all of the year. It only has to be there for like 14 days out of the growing season, which is not that much. Wetlands are protected. Like I said, we're going to talk more about them. They're nature's filters, so they're really good for getting the pollutants out of the water, as well as they provide a habitat for many plants and animals. One of our problems here is runoff from fertilizer, animal waste, and silage contains nitrates and other nutrients. So the problem is that anything that we find on the ground, if water runs over it, it's going to pick it up and move it, and eventually if it drains into the river, it's going to pollute our river system. So much so that we might not even be able to have fish or any plants living in the system anymore. This process that this diagram is going over is called eutrophication. It's where those fertilizers, the nitrates and phosphates, are going to reach such a level that allows the algae to grow out of control. which seems cool, but the algae will block the sunlight from the other plants and they'll die. And not only that, the algae will eventually grow to such a rate where the pond can't support it anymore, so it'll die. And then the bacteria come in to break down the dead algae, and they'll use up all the oxygen in the system. If there's no oxygen in the system, few animals or plants can survive, meaning that your system is going to die. You're going to have a dead pond if you've got too much algae or you've got those fertilizers running off into your system. This is, again, eutrophication. So our definition here is the excess richness of nutrients in a lake or body of water, frequently due to runoff from land, which causes a dense growth of plant life and the death of animal life from lack of oxygen. This would be an example of a pond that is probably undergoing eutrophication. It's got way too much algae. All right, so here is where, so that was part 1 of your things that you have to do today. Part 2 is to complete this video right here. You're going to watch it. You're going to complete your diagram. Again, you can use the diagram that I posted there if you want to print it out. You can create your own water diagram using a piece of paper and a pencil. Or if you were face-to-face with me, you can complete the diagram that's already found in your notebooks. The last thing I want you to do today, again, is to define those 7 words for me. Put them in your own words. You may do it on a Google Doc if you'd like. You may also write them out or put them somewhere on your diagram if you like as well. All right, guys, enjoy your time. Have a fantastic day, and I will check back in with you tomorrow.